My friends, it's now time when I'm going to invite and request the chief guest of this function, Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan ji, to address the gathering. But please put your hands together and welcome with a big round of applause, Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan ji.
Thank you. Friends, I'm delighted to be with all of you. Now it's already afternoon, this afternoon. Congratulations, it's a time for a genuine celebration and happiness for all of you, as I mentioned last night. You know, no other society celebrates the success of its youngsters like our society. In no other country are young civil servants given such honor and respect. That means something. We have an obligation to give back to the society. At the age of 23, 24, 25, if people put you on a pedestal, if they give you enormous respect, it's because there's also an expectation from you. There is hope from you. So my first appeal to all of you is something unusual. After today, forget the examination and the success in that and your rank. They do not define you. They only give you an opportunity. I know it's very difficult to stomach in this moment of elation. But what defines is what you do with this. Power does not define a person. The purpose that you bring to power is what defines you. Position does not define a person. The accomplishments and the outcomes you generate for the public good, they define you. People are not remembered because they happen to be secretaries to government or cabinet secretaries or something else. Nobody cares. People are remembered because they made a difference. They made an impact. You are privileged to be in a country where, wherever you are born, whatever be the caste, region, religion, language, you could have an opportunity to be in the senior civil services by virtue of your hard work, your ability. Not because of birth, not because of sifarish, not because of some kind of a feudal connection. I'm sure there are quite a few here who come from very humble beginnings. And that's a tribute to our democracy, to our republic. But if we do not measure up to what is expected of us, that is a monumental tragedy. There are civil servants who made spectacular difference to this country. Let me mention a couple of them, for instance. VP Menon. Menon was not even in the ICS initially. He rose from the provincial services to ICS. His seminal contribution at the time of partition of India, and particularly in the integration of states, was a remarkable tribute to what a civil servant could do. His name is etched in our history. A much less known civil servant, B. Sivaraman. He and C. Subramanian, the then Food and Agriculture Minister, singularly, the two of them brought about the Green Revolution of India, a country which was starving. Millions were on the verge of starvation most of the time. That country became self-sufficient with dignity and integrity within a decade because of the work of Sivaraman, led by, of course, C. Subramanian. I can go on and on. But we don't remember many other civil servants. You go to your district office, you go to your state, there are many who held offices, you'll have names there, or you go to your income tax office or some other department that you adorn, there are many names that find place there, but nobody remembers them. So my appeal to you is, take this as an opportunity, a priceless opportunity, not as a job, that's incidental, not as a position, and don't join the rat race. I know it's not a very pleasant advice, because you are intelligent enough, capable enough to survive anywhere. Do not be more loyal than the king. You have to work under the Constitution, but you are not slaves. You have to follow the rules, but rules should not enslave you. And therefore, the first few years, the reputation you build for integrity, for competence, and above all, for a sense of public purpose, devotion to public purpose, that will carry you through. And if you are able to sustain that, it does not matter who tells you what. It does not matter what even the rule book says. What matters is, what do you do with the power that you have? Trust me on that. So don't be timid, meek, scared, frightened creatures. That's not the reason why people respect you. I must pay tribute to the UPSC, one of the unsung heroes of India. In a country where ubiquitous corruption and influence peddling are so widely prevalent that we have lost trust in public institutions, UPSC's work has been remarkable in the past 77 years. With unfailing irregularity, as opposed to many state public service commissions which have not really adorned themselves with glory. The UPSC has been punctual, has been competent, has shown unmatched integrity. I salute the UPSC and Dr. Agarwal and his colleagues, predecessors and successors for the outstanding work they are doing. No examination is perfect. Whatever you do, there's always room for improvement. Therefore, if I don't make it, I always feel there's something wrong with the examination. If I do well, I think it's wonderful. But if you have an objective view, our UPSC has done a remarkable job. Dr. Agarwal is one of those who tried to improve it further. I was in the Administrative Reforms Commission when he was making those efforts to bring in logic and reasoning, aptitude. I remember vividly, Indian Parliament rarely bothered about education. I think the only time in the last 20 years the Parliament debated education was for about 4.5, 5 hours about the aptitude test. Many MPs said, no, hamare chokre, they will not get selected if you have this aptitude test. Why? Reasoning kya hai? As if you can join the civil services without reasoning. Poor Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, a great friend of mine whom we all admire, he persuaded them to say, look, let's not scrap the examination, but let's not allow it to be counted for merit. It will be only qualifying test. Economist wrote a brilliant piece at that time. It said, the answer of the Indian elites to the decline in the quality of education is not to improve the outcomes in education, but to lower the standards of recruitment for the superior civil services. This is symptomatic of what is wrong with the country. This is what you're up against. So are you going to challenge the status quo and make a difference to this country? Or are you going to go with the flow and be a part of the problem? That is a fundamental challenge each of us have to face as citizens, as public servants, as men and women who care for the country's future. Let me therefore talk about a few things which are self-evident, but yet we tend to ignore. Why the state at all? Why do we require this massive recruitment drive, hundreds of thousands of employees and officials, and this whole system? We are all part of the evolution. I'm a student of biology. Animals don't have governments. Only human society evolved the system of government. Because we are endowed with the ability, without going into too many evolutionary details, ability to build large communities and societies transcending instinct and genes. Animals behave by pure instinct. Instinct for survival, instinct for propagation of the genes. Nothing else matters. We have transcended it in many ways. Though we are still creatures of instincts, human beings have unique abilities. Once you have a large society, there has to be a reconciliation between the individual gain and collective good. In animals, instinct takes care. If somebody else is taking away my prey, I go and pounce on that somebody and kill. Nothing more is required. Human beings cannot afford to behave like that. There's a reason why we created the institution of government. 85% of what you do in your life, what I do in my life, is entirely in our hands. Where you live, what you study, which course you pursue, which profession you practice, which business you do, which job you undertake, where you go, whom you love, whom you marry, how many children you have, where your children go. It's entirely your private business. But there's 15–20% of our life which is vital for our happiness and is not in our control. That is the collective goods and services. I keep reminding young people all the time, no matter how rich and powerful you become, no matter how successful you are, no matter how big a mansion you build for yourself, the mosquito that bites the neighborhood urchin will enter your home, will bite you, your children, and transmit the dengue virus. Because mosquitoes are truly socialists. They don't respect rank or position or status or money. They don't care whether you're from MIT University or some other school. Mosquitoes do what they do best. And mosquitoes cannot be controlled by you and me individually. We have to do it collectively. There's no choice. That's all what the government is about. That's all what the community is about. That's all what public service is about. In the modern context, what are the collective needs? Obvious things are public order, justice, and rule of law. Every government, even tyrannical governments, corrupt governments, totalitarian governments, every government throughout history pursued that. That's why we had civil service, not today. In China, as many of you I'm sure know, 6th century AD, we had civil services, competitive examination. So there's nothing new about it, except that we now made it rule of law, not merely the king's law, not the whims of a ruler, but a rule of law. That's obvious. But beyond that, we have to now build infrastructure, the community infrastructure for the collective good. Ashoka was one of the great pioneers of that. That's why it's called Ashoka the Great. Roman Empire and others subsequently made it into a fine art. The infrastructure, which we all understand. Only in the last 200 years, we started thinking about education as a state's function. Because with the advent of industrial revolution, without education, without skills, you cannot be productive. As late as 19th century, education was not part of the state's functioning in the early part. Abraham Lincoln, who was born in 1809, had no education with the state support. He went to a church school for a couple of years. The rest of his education was self-taught. But eventually, education is now the central piece of the state's strategy and functioning. Then healthcare, that's essentially the last century, in order to enhance productivity. I would submit these are the essential functions of the state. Never lose sight of them. We confused ourselves in the past 50, 60 years in many parts of the world in our country as to what exactly the state should be doing. We pay taxes for the state to perform its collective functions which I cannot perform otherwise, and without which my life is incomplete. There can be many other things you may like to do, but you must do the core things first. The core functions of the state are mandatory. How are we performing? Public order, not bad. Not necessarily because of government's ability, but because of society's strength. Justice, pretty disgraceful. Rule of law, might is right in most parts of the country, irrespective of who is in power. I'm a great optimist. So I'm not saying this because I'm a pessimist or I'm angry. I'm simply trying to see what is happening and how to set it right. That's our job as public servants and citizens. Education, I don't know how many of you are aware. Have you heard of the survey called PISA survey? You all fresh graduates from colleges and universities. You are all here despite our education system, not because of our education system. In a PISA survey some years ago, out of the 74 countries and entities that participated in a global survey at the age of 15 to measure the educational outcomes, the kind of outcomes that we actually need, ability to comprehend and communicate language, ability to understand mathematical concepts and apply them for problem solving, ability to apply logic that Dr. Agrawal tried to bring into UPSC and make reasonable conclusions from given facts. These are what you require at the age of 15. Not when Ashoka was born, not when somebody became the viceroy. We don't care. Out of the 74 entities, India was ranked 73rd. Actually, 2 entities of India participated. They were 72nd and 73rd, respectively. Thank God there was a country called Kyrgyzstan in this list. They took the last position. I was one of those who went to town with it across the whole country, hoping that those in public office, the civil servants and the politicians, will take note of it and figure out what is wrong in a country where there's so much of demand for education, where we love our children, where parents sacrifice so much. You will not be here. In almost everybody's case, I can say, without your parents and families sacrificing enormously. Whatever be our country's failings, our society is strong. We are willing to even die for our children. Do anything to give them a chance. But despite the strong demand, why is educational outcome so bad? I hope that would be the issue. I don't know if some of you are aware. The government's response was spectacular. Dr. Agrawal, my life has been about governance reform for the past decades now. And I know a bit about how to fight those battles. You don't require power always. You can influence decision making by strategizing. So I thought I knew a bit about the chess game. But the government's response was completely unexpected. What did they say? They said, henceforth, India shall not participate in PISA surveys. Instead of figuring out how to improve the outcomes of school education for our kids, we wanted to be like ostrich, the proverbial ostrich. We don't even know what is happening where we are. This was in 2009. It's now 15 years. This continued. Years ago, when a cabinet minister and I participated at a Harvard conference, when I mentioned this, he said, but no, it's not our government. I said, but your government did not change the stance either. So outcomes are appallingly bad. Healthcare, I'm a medical doctor by training. While we have done some very good things, 55 million people annually are descending into poverty on account of inadequate health care. 55 million people annually descending into poverty. It's a phenomenal number. I'm not saying all this to depress you, but there is a monumental challenge. Your task is cut out. There's a phenomenal opportunity. Now, will the opportunity meet the challenge? You are the bridges between the opportunity and challenge. It's not file pushing. It's not seeking a position. It's not rat race. It's about outcomes in these areas, specific, tangible, measurable, on a big enough scale. Rahul used the word institutionalization in some other context. We know how to innovate. Somebody mentioned to me that he or she is from Ahmednagar district. Rajnikant Aroli, for instance, from this state, Ahmednagar district, he showed what can be done in healthcare 50 years ago. When I visited Rajnikant Aroli, I dreamt that India would see, at least much of India would see that kind of healthcare outcomes within the next 10, 15 years. Maybe 200 villages I've seen subsequently, and 400 villages, that's all. The challenge is institutionalization of innovations for mass replication. It's not about individual glory. If your predecessor does something wonderful, your duty is to further improve it and then spread it wider. Not to kill it out of personal ego and pettiness and then start de novo. A society now prospers like that. Humanity learns from the past. We are a unique species. We have this ability to transfer knowledge generationally. That's our greatest tribute. That's the reason why we are here. Otherwise, we would have been like cockroaches. We alone have the ability to transfer knowledge to others, the peers, and to the next generation. Therefore, no matter how brilliant you are, your next generation is going to be better than you because they learned everything from you and they're a little bit taller than you. Not only physically, but also intellectually. That is what humanity is about. If we don't, therefore, spread the innovations, institutionalize them, allow mass replication, we are not making the kind of difference we need in society. Why I'm saying all this is, if you take the 50 countries, anybody can Google and do this, 50 largest countries by GDP. Let's say $200 billion is the cutoff line. On every single significant indicator that I mentioned, number of cases pending in courts, length of roads, quality of school education, healthcare outcomes, you name it, every single indicator, India ranks in the bottom 5. In some areas, we're trying to improve, but we don't deserve to be in bottom 5. All of us, with all the brain power, all the fantastic institutions, and all the resources, and 5,000 years of history, culture, and civilization, we do not deserve to be in the bottom 5. Which are the countries in our company? 3 countries consistently are in the bottom 5 along with us. Pakistan, Bangladesh, I don't even understand why we partitioned, if we do the same as they. Nigeria. These 3 countries unfailingly on every indicator. The 5th country kept varying depending on the index. I'm not saying this to depress you. I am an eternal optimist. I'm one of the greatest optimists of this country. But optimism is not romanticism. Optimism is not avoiding truth. Optimism is understanding the problem, bringing your qualities to the table, and damn it, make the change happen. You have that opportunity. That's what this recruitment is about. That's what these institutions are about. That's what this celebration and veneration are about. It's not about you, forgive me. It's about our hopes and aspirations for the future of this country. We are all in the evening of our lives. Dr. Vishwanath Karad, Dr. Agarwal and I. Dr. Agarwal looks terribly young and youthful. He has plenty of years left. But we are all in the evening of our life. I think I can say on behalf of the 3 of us, not Rahul and all the youngsters, that we have nothing personal to look forward to. When we certainly like to depart with the sense of satisfaction that, yes, our country is fulfilling its potential. Yes, every child, no matter where she is born, irrespective of the circumstances of the birth, or the accident of the womb, as Warren Buffett called, has an opportunity now. That's not an unreasonable expectation. That's not an unfair expectation. That's not an unrealistic expectation in this day and age. I do not know if there is a God. Everywhere you see, Vishwanath Sahib is so spiritual, everywhere you see spirituality and some notion of God. I don't know much about God. My relationship with God is one of mutual non-interference. If God doesn't bother about me, I ignore God too. But I do believe that there is sin. There are 2 great sins of which this country has abundance. The first is unfulfilled potential. Unfulfilled potential. Every single child is endowed by nature, or if you believe in God, with enormous ability, with enormous potential. The word nature itself embeds that idea of potential. If that potential is not fulfilled because we are stupid enough as a society not to give a chance to every single child to fulfill a potential, then we are committing a grave sin. We may individually absolve ourselves, but we are all part of the collective. The second is avoidable suffering. Animesh told us with emotion about his parents and how his mother did not have the opportunity to see her child get into these services. Now, if the death is unavoidable, because after all, mortality is human, if there's nothing much we could do about it, either natural death with age or some disease which is incurable, we only grieve, but we can't do nothing about it. But if you have preventable death or preventable suffering, if it's well within our reach to make that happen, and if we still don't make it happen, we are collectively committing a grave sin. It is to avoid or eliminate these 2 great sins that you are here as embodiment of our aspirations as a society. And let's not blame the politicians, because in this country, the favorite pastime is blaming the politicians. Politicians, bureaucrats, and judges. Trust me. Among the three, perhaps the one who deserves most sympathy is the politician. The poor fellow has to go back again and again in a poor country where the voters don't understand always their self-interest and get their mandate, get their support. Across caste, region, religion, language, it's not easy. The civil servants don't have that problem. You're given lifelong security, unlike any other country on earth. Lifelong security, Article 311. Patel deliberately introduced that. Judges are even better off. At least your well-being will be affected, at least in some cases, not always, in some services, by the whims of politicians. You're transferred, posted at will. But judges are invulnerable to political vagaries. Let's be truthful. Our failure collectively is pretty evenly spread. The political failure, bureaucratic failure, and the judicial failure. So the blame throwing does not help. Democracy is something that we have to operate within. There is no substitute to democracy. Do not vilify the politician. Does not mean you submit to the politician. Does not mean you become more loyal than the king. But respect the political process. As a great philosopher said, man's capacity for justice makes democracy possible. We all have this capacity for justice, inherently. But man's inclination to injustice makes democracy necessary. There are moments when you feel like giving up on democracy and all this chaos, this mess. It is messy. Democracy is messy, but there's no substitute to that. Respect it. Help it. It is when the democratic mandate and the civil service professionalism come together that we achieve great results. A B. Sivaraman or a VP Menon or many others did not do things in isolation. Without a C. Subramanian, there's no B. Sivaraman. Without a Sardar Patel, there's no VP Menon. We require both. It does not mean you yield to pressure, but it means you understand, you learn to persuade, and you choose your battles very carefully. A wise general chooses his battlefields very carefully and then stands up. Doesn't make everything into an issue worthy of fight. And get the results. Have a sense of strategy. Because without public opinion, even well-meaning initiatives of the government or the civil service will not work. As Lincoln said, public opinion is everything. Without it, nothing will succeed. With it, nothing will fail. That's the draw we have given. We have no option. You're not asked to solve a mathematical problem and say, this is it. No. You're given a real human problem, and you're asked to deal with human beings. In your own family, however logical you are, if you don't know how to persuade the members of your family, you don't get your way, right? How can you get it in the country? The farm laws enacted by the government were extremely good. I can guarantee you that. I worked quite a bit of my time in the farm sector. But they did not work because we did not know how to persuade the people, at least some part of the country. So make democracy your strength, not your weakness. Learn to work and yet get spectacular results. Have a sense of strategy. Remember, the future of India is not made by you and me. It's made by the people of India. Your role in the governing process is creating a systemic design, an incentive structure so that everybody is a partner and their behavior is altered, and therefore the outcomes are altered for the better. It's not a prime minister who changes a country. It's not a chief minister, a district magistrate, or a commissioner of customs or income tax or somebody. It is the stakeholders, the people of the country that change it. Your role, my role is designing a system, an inherent incentive structure to make them think and act differently to get better outcomes. That's how nations change. Finally, is there hope? Because I gave you a litany of the woes of India. Never despair. We live in a fantastic age. We can accelerate progress dramatically. We can do things that were unheard of, that were only dreamt by philosophers a century or two ago. You are all lucky. We were all lucky, but you in particular are lucky. Sometimes you may have to be patient, but you can also accelerate the process. Let me give you the story of one person to understand how real change happens in human society sometimes. To conclude, there was a man called Ignaz Semmelweis. Semmelweis was born in 1818 in Hungary. At that time, Austro-Hungarian Empire was one, and Vienna was the seat of culture and political power in Europe. And Semmelweis became a physician. He moved to the city of Vienna to practice. He noticed that about 20% of pregnant women, 20% of pregnant women were dying after childbirth with what they called puerperal fever. They didn't know what it was. That was the time when they did not know about anything about bacteria or infection. The word was not invented. They had no clue. 20% were dying. Imagine, 20 out of 100 women in pregnancy dying. He discovered through a lot of experimentation with empiric evidence, but without understanding why, that if only the doctors washed their hands properly, what we now call sterilization. He propagated the idea that if you wash in chlorinated lime your hands before touching a patient and after helping her before going to the next patient, just simple thing. Suddenly he found that the death rate came down to about 2% or so. 90% fall in mortality. He deserves 10 Nobel Prizes for that. And he had empirical evidence. He was pleading with the fellow doctors, not general public, the fellow professionals whose job it was to save lives. You know, not one idiot listened to him. Not one doctor said, let me also try. They laughed him off. They branded him insane. Semmelweis was thrown out of the job. He was branded insane. He was institutionalized. You know, in those days, 1850s or so, 1860s, if you're institutionalized in a mental hospital, what was the great treatment? Even when I was a child in a village, when somebody was allegedly, quote unquote, mad, we didn't know what it was. They used to beat up with, this neem branches and things like that. This was not too long ago, though I am pretty old and ancient. So, 19th century, they knew nothing. So he was tortured in the mental institution. Finally, he died in 1865 of the gangrenous injuries he received. Now, that's a bad part of humanity. But see the beautiful part of humanity. Within 20 years, 3 men inspired by Semmelweis, Robert Koch, who came up with what we call the Koch's postulates. If we say COVID virus causes COVID disease, it's not merely a statement. There are certain scientific standards to be met. Koch was the man who developed that. Louis Pasteur, whose name is familiar, pasteurization, he came up with the germ theory, how disease, infectious disease was contracted. And a man called Lister, whose name became a byword for hand washing. Even today, the mouthwash, one of the standard things is the Listerine, named after Lister. These 3 were contemporaries. Within 20 years, the world changed. That is the power of the human mind. That is the power of the human institutions. Except that we don't have to kill a Semmelweis now. We can actually verify and institutionalize and spread it quickly and change the lives of humanity. There are going to be moments of despair. There are going to be moments when you say, my God, I'm working so hard, I'm fighting so hard. Is it worth it? It is well worth it. Never lose hope. And you live in this day and age because there are so many opportunities we did not have earlier to persuade fellow human beings. You certainly will not be imprisoned or put away in an asylum like Semmelweis. You will not be tortured and you will not be wounded very badly. You will not catch gangrene today for fighting for the right thing. So what are we really complaining about? I'm absolutely certain you will have a wonderful time as citizens, as professionals, and as public servants. And I'm sure you have the qualities that make you fine public servants. That's what this whole selection process is about. But as I said before, it doesn't really define you. What defines you is what you do with the opportunity. We require, as G.J. Holland said, tall men and women, sun-crowned, who live above the fog in public duty and in private thinking. I wish you all the very best.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your words of wisdom. And I think we all should rise in our seats and give a standing ovation to Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan ji. A big round of applause, my friends, for all the guidance and mentoring he has done and his commitment. And of course, we cannot forget Agarwal sir also. Let's give him also a big round of applause, my friends. Thank you, sir. Thank you, both of you, for your enlightenment and guidance to all these young minds. Thank you very much.